Now, coming in at pick 11 for the Miami Dolphins, this is my first pick in my kind of turn of taking the odd teams where I'm kind of thinking there's a lot of different options. And truthfully, new regime, they have a new quarterback, they have a new general manager. Like, I don't know what the Dolphins will do because we haven't seen this current incarnation of Miami. We haven't had, patterns to recognize over the years. So I'm going to do something where I look at the roster as a whole and say, what do I think Jeff Hafley is going to want? What do I think Jeff Hafley is going to need? Personally speaking, I think of Jeff Hafley as a guy who obviously will prioritize defense. He's a defense coordinator in Green Bay. But I'm looking at some players right here. The edge rusher run has kind of ended in terms of the A tier pass rushers in this class, right? The guys that, are going to go top 10, going to go top 5, et cetera, et cetera. So I might go with another playmaker here, a guy that I think could help fill a need for them after trading away Minka Fitzpatrick, and that's Dylan Thieneman. Don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. That's how I've heard it pronounced. I hope I did it right. But you want to talk about a guy who is a super athlete? He is phenomenal. He is phenomenal. I think that Jeff Hafley will like to have a player to start off his regime in Miami who is an athlete. Again, we talked about like the way that the safety position over the last few years, Kyle Hamilton, Niki Menwari, Derwin James was doing this forever with the Chargers, can transform your defense and give your defense that identity. Jeff Hafley, to me, is probably going to want his version of his defensive centerpiece, his first draft in Miami. And I mean, you look at some of these edge rushers, I don't see a lot of the top tier edge rushers available. I don't know that they'll reach on a guy like Akeem Mesidor. So for me, I would take a guy that probably has a lot of upside, who's a great athlete, and Jeff Hafley can see what he can do. He's got a fresh toy to play with here in Miami. So that's my pick. But admittedly, Miami is pretty hard to predict because, like I said, they have a totally new regime. So I don't have old patterns to kind of fall back on with them.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, they definitely could go Thieneman. I never really thought about that as a possibility. It's a little bit of a reach, but at the same time, when you have that type of combine, you really can go
Yeah.
anywhere. It feels like it could go very high like this. He is a remarkable athlete. There's no doubt about that. Someone with a lot of versatility. He can play a lot of different roles. I do find it interesting. Right after moving on from Fitzpatrick, you find your replacement right after. It is interesting. I want to stay at DB though, as we talk about the Dallas Cowboys, because they need one. They need one badly. They got
What are you doing
shredded
here, Jared
apart in the
Jones?
secondary.
What are you doing here, Jared
Well, you
Jones?
have to go with the defensive back position, and I think it has to be. It's tough because on one hand, Jermon McCoy, his injury history and whatever is going on with that injury should scare any reasonable team off.
Mm-hmm.
But Jerry Jones is not reasonable.
No, he's
He is
not.
not like sane people will look at the fact that this guy has been injured for a year, still won't go in the combine, still won't do anything, and say, okay, that guy's not touchable. There's no way I'm drafting him in the first round. But the Cowboys aren't sane. Jerry Jones isn't sane. And there's a chance that if this guy is healthy, just looking at his tape, if he is healthy, you're getting like a Sauce Gardner level prospect here
Mm-hmm.
because his tape is that good. His tape is that caliber of player. He was locked down in every way, shape, and form. He is that caliber of player, and I do think if he didn't deal with that injury, and we're just dealing with the player he was in 2023, is that what it would be now? Wow, that's crazy
Wow,
to think
that is
about.
crazy.
It's 2020. No, I think it would
No,
be
2024.
2024.
It'll be 24. Yeah,
2024.
yeah, 24.
Yeah,
Yeah.
injured partially through 2024, but 2024 we're looking at maybe in a draft class where Sonny Styles is the player that we're talking about, and all those Ohio State guys like Arvell Reese are crazy. We're looking at the best player in the class right here. If we're just
Mm.
looking at that tape, the issue is he's coming off such a major injury. I think if any team were willing to take that risk, though, with the number 12 overall pick, I think it would be the Dallas Cowboys. I think without Mansour Delane here, there really is one answer, and it's Jermon McCoy. It is. So I'm going to go McCoy here for the Cowboys.
Yeah, that does seem to be a very Jerry Jones type of pick. Gambling, he's a high stakes gambler. A guy that would gamble on Jermon McCoy not only being healthy, but being the player that he was prior to injury. I think that is the quintessential Dallas Cowboys pick. Now moving on to pick 13 with the Los Angeles Rams. And I hate to say this because I'm about to pair them up with a guy that I really, really like. But when you look at this Rams team and when you look at this, contention window that they're in, maybe only have a couple of years left. They're everybody's darling to go back to the Super Bowl. They were everybody's darling this past year to go to the Super Bowl, and for good reason, right? I can't for good reason, right? Stafford played like an MVP last year. He was the MVP. Puka Nacua played like the Offensive Player of the Year. Sean McVay was in his bag. They ran into Seattle, unfortunately. Womp womp, Crimea River. But this is a Rams team that is very primed for contention, as evidenced by their recent move for Trent McDuffie. They're pushing all their chips into the table. I know we've talked about in the past how the Rams are on the forefront of this multiple tight end sets, of this 13 personnel movement that everybody is, I'm sure, soon going to hop on the bandwagon of. But I can't help but think that taking this 13th pick, they're going to go receiver. And the way that Sean McVay thinks, the way Les Snead thinks, they loved high impact players. Now, their defensive line, I think, would be a consideration here, other than the fact that, like I said, all the good edge rushers are gone. Not all the good edge rushers, all the A tier, top tier edge rushers are gone. And the fact that their defensive line is in a phenomenal spot with all those young guys. I think right here, potentially it's, biblical level greed. But I think Mekhi Lemon's the pick here for the Los Angeles Rams. Getting Stafford another weapon. Davante Adams is older. He, missed a good chunk of the year last year with that hamstring injury. I don't know that you want to depend on him to be the Robin to Puka Nacua's Batman. Imagine calling Davante Adams Robin a few years ago. Isn't that crazy? But it's true. He is the number 2 to Puka Nacua. But if you can add a young guy like Mekhi Lemon into that mix as well, just give Stafford and McVay all of the toys to play with. Two of those guys who I think will deploy those guys very well. I do think receiver is a luxury pick for them. But again, they're so stacked. And they have the 13th overall pick that they could go and afford to make a luxury pick like this at receiver and have a contention plan or a contingency plan, for when Davante Adams is no longer on the Rams in probably a year or so.
I do like that mindset of looking ahead, right?
Yeah.
Now, I also find it interesting. This was a team trying to add AJ Brown and
Exactly.
move on from Davante Adams.
Mhm.
So this is a very likely possibility because they've already kind of shown that this is their mindset. This is what they want to do. They want to start thinking about the future, life after Davante Adams.
And I can't say that he's washed because he did lead the NFL in receiving touchdowns this year.
Davante Adams, we talk about how much route running means, and it is purely because of his route running ability. He is still, I would say, a top 10 guy at the receiver position. I would say that.
I wouldn't say top 10, but
his ability to get open, his knack for getting open, and his technicality, it is one of one.
Yeah, he is a savant when it comes.
That stays around, right?
Yes.
And Mekhi Lemon has some of that. Now, I do think Jordan Tyson has a little bit more of it. I think he's more of a Davante Adams replacement. But of course, the concerns about him being injured and the injury concerns should scare a team. But now we move over to the Ravens, and the question kind of becomes, well, are they scared of that from Jordan Tyson?
Yeah.
I do think Jordan Tyson's very much in play here for the Baltimore Ravens. I definitely think so. And this is where the Ravens have to look in the mirror because there are two things they could do. They could either go with kind of the luxury thing and try and replace Linderbaum with Vega Ione, the interior offensive lineman out of Penn State.
I'm glad you said his name first because I was thinking about picking him, and I'm like, I have no idea how to pronounce this guy's first name. So thank you for taking the bullet and being the sacrificial lamb there.
Yeah, no, I didn't even say the full name because it's like Ola. I have it up right here. Ola Eva Vega Ione.
Yeah, Vega Ione is good.
But people call him Vega Ione, so I'm just sticking with that.
I'm good with that.
I don't want to sound like a white guy trying to pronounce some name that I have no business trying to.
It's like the POV or the white guy ordering food at a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be that close.
So do they go with the luxury and try and replace Linderbaum there? Or do they go with the wide receiver, try and add to the talent that you got in Zay Flowers? It's really tough. It is. But for me, it's between those two. I think You see Mekhi Lemon going right here. You trust, kind of foolishly, but you do trust your ability to build up your interior offensive line in-house and develop them. They've been trying to do that for a while. They kind of failed. We saw a lot of that last year. Guys like Falele weren't very good. Voorhees wasn't very good. And a guy like Vega Ione, I really think is a guarantee to at least be a solid offensive player for you.
Mm-hmm.
But they need that complimentary wide receiver so bad. They really do. So I think Jordan Tyson is the pick here. I think they're going to go with him, compliment Zay Flowers with him, and I think that's a really nice tandem there. I definitely
Yeah,
do.
they have tried mostly unsuccessfully to get Lamar Jackson his big play wide receiver. They tried it with Rashad Bateman, that didn't work. They tried it with Zay Flowers, it kind of worked. Like he's okay. I wouldn't say he's a game changer by any means, but he's a solid NFL wide receiver. But they're trying to hit home runs in Baltimore. I really do think so. Jordan Tyson is going to be a guy that is going to be able to give them another shot at that. So I'm with the pick here. I think wide receiver is in need. I maybe think just the Ravens culture and what they're doing is going to speak to Ione. However, I do know this is a new regime now. This is not the John Hart. This is not your dad's Baltimore Ravens. This is the Jesse Minter and the Declan Doyle-led Baltimore Ravens. Maybe they have a different philosophy. So I don't really know what they are going to do. Again, if one of the top edge rushers were there, they'd have a guy to pair up with Max Crosby. I mean Trey Hendrickson. And so, but that's not the case. Obviously, at pick 14. How funny that they have their pick 14 back now all of a sudden. Pick 15 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Man, just as taking a macro view, the Buccaneers are in just such a weird spot right now. I just think that they're in a weird spot. I don't know that the Buccaneers are great anywhere. I don't know that they're horrible anywhere. They're a team to me that screams like we need to do like what the Seahawks did a few years ago and just reset. Right? We're stuck in neutral. We are not going anywhere. We're not a Super Bowl team. We're never going to pick in the top 5. This is a team that couldn't win the worst division in football last year. They went 8-9, despite ironically winning the last game against the Panthers to give them the same record and then the tiebreaker, but whatever. This is a team that, again, I think they kind of, in a way, have needs everywhere and very few places at the same time. Because, again, they're not great anywhere. So if I'm Todd Bowles and I'm Jason Light, I'm really trying to go back to my morals. Like, what worked in the past? What made Tampa so good when we were at our prime? And to me, that's when they were really good up front. That is when they were really good up front. That is when they were really good on the defensive line. I know this might be a reach, but just based on what the Buccaneers, again, have prided themselves on, defensive coach, I think Akeem Mesidor is kind of the first guy in that second tier of edge rushers that goes in this draft. Maybe overdrafted just a little bit, but A, he plays a premium position, and B, I think the Buccaneers are kind of desperate to get some of that juice back from the early 2020s when their defense with Tom Brady was so impenetrable. I see this kind of as a desperation pick in a way. Again, this is not what I would do. This is what I'm predicting the Buccaneers to do. But I think Akeem Mesidor is the pick for the Buccaneers here at pick 15.
Yeah, and now we're seeing some really, I mean, I think they're pretty good offensive linemen continuing to fall,
Yes.
right? And it now becomes a question of what team is going to take advantage. This is where, again, I could see a team trading back because someone's going to pay a high price to get a Monroe Freeling with the pick 16 or Francis Magoa at pick 16. Someone would trade up in order to do exactly that. But we're talking about the Jets. We're doing a draft with no trades. I think the Jets, they're not going to be the team to take advantage of the offensive line fall, although they lost
actually have
AVT.
pretty good tackles. That's the only thing they do got going on right now. Yeah.
And they did lose AVT. Maybe they go Vega Ione. But I do think it's between going wide receiver. The issue is not as many wide receivers here right now. Or, and this is truly where I think they go here, because the wide receivers went, they go corner, and there's one specific corner that screams Aaron Glenn. Screams Aaron Glenn. And that's Avion Terrell.
I knew it.
Avion Terrell. I think it is a textbook Aaron Glenn pick right here. I would lock it in right there. If the wide receivers look like they do right there, and they have the 16th pick, and they don't go Vega Ione, they go Avion. You got to keep in mind too. Yeah, they added a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball through free agency. Only added one corner, and it was Nashawn Wright, who was near the top of the league in terms of yards allowed.
But
So
he had a lot of interceptions, though.
he had a lot of interceptions.
I know.
You're not
He was
spreading
not a good player.
misinformation.
He was
You're
not a good player.
spreading misinformation by saying that he had a lot of interceptions.
I'm not.
But
me,
like
me when I lie without lying. Me when I lie without lying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also isn't a very good player.
No.
Avion Terrell, he's a physical cornerback who plays lockdown coverage, and he's very, very responsive in man coverage. He could stay in any wide receiver's back pocket. Very physical, very, very handsy. That's what Aaron Glenn likes. And you want to bring in your Sauce Gardner replacement. These are the types of guys you look at. Now, will he be Sauce Gardner? I don't love him. I'm not in love with Avion Terrell, but he is the type of guy Aaron Glenn tends to like. So
yeah,
I think that's definitely going to be their pick in this situation. If it falls this way.
Just so we're clear now, with pick 2 and with pick 16, we have the Jets taking Arvell Reese, and we have the Jets taking Avion Terrell. If you told me that the Jets take an edge rusher and a corner at pick 2 and 16, I think that's a pretty perfect draft. So we are.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is your defense is or your offense is still like.
You got to do one at a time, though. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, and the Jets aren't rebuilt in 75 years, so you can't like rebuild it. I know that's a good one.
That's a good quote.
That is a good quote.
I like that.
I might frame that actually in New York. See how fast I get beat up. But you can't, I think, like try to stretch yourself too thin. You have to say, all right, there's a good defensive player. We're going to take a good defensive player. I think taking an edge rusher in a corner for the Jets would be an ideal swing. But here at pick 17, a team in the Lions that, by all accounts had a very disappointing year, didn't make the playoffs. Every year since the NFC Championship game peak, they have gone a 1 or 2 steps more downhill. And it seemed like this offseason, there was a lot of weird stuff going on. Taylor Decker retired and then said, no, I'm not going to retire. I'm coming back. And then, actually release me. So they did. There's some weird stuff going on. But when the Lions were at the peak of their powers, and when the Lions were one of the best offenses in the NFL, number 1, they had Ben Johnson, Crimea River. Number 2, they had a dominant offensive line. That is why I think that their pick here is pretty obvious, especially with the offensive linemen sliding in this draft the way that they are. Monroe Freeling, to me, is a Detroit Lion. You can debate between which tackle you like the most. I think he screams Detroit, in my opinion. Detroit, a lot of these other teams have like those tough SEC type of guys. I know the SEC is losing its allure a little bit because, the Big Ten has been running college football for the last 3 years. They're the last 3 national champs. I get it. Monroe Freeling, to me, feels like a Detroit Lion. He joins his former teammate Tate Ratledge there in the middle. And I think that they are very happy to take the first offensive tackle in this draft because they need one now with the departure of Taylor Decker. My, question now is, do you move, 4-time All-Pro Penei Sewell to left tackle? Or do you keep him at right tackle and make this rookie your starting left tackle? I think there's some interesting combinations there. We've seen a couple of guys who were elite at right tackle flip over to left tackle. I think that might be a conversation for another day. But when you have an opportunity to take a guy like this at pick 17, I think you have to do it, especially with the weird release of Taylor Decker.
Yeah, I think there is something to say about how Penei Sewell has been a right tackle for as long as he has and has been great at it. So maybe you don't want to move him, but it's definitely a conversation worth having. Now, you took Thieneman earlier, and that was the guy I was eyeing.
He is such a Viking. He is such a Viking if he's there.
I was eyeing him with the Vikings pick. I was.
Yeah.
But
Harrison Smith, welcome back.
And that's something you have to look at. And there's a part of me that says, maybe you go another DB, you kind of need it. Maybe you need a defensive tackle. But then I looked and said, well, what was the problem with this team last year? What was the offense? It was the offense. And, we talk about the new wave and how the good coaches adopt the trends that work in this league.
I know exactly what you're thinking right here.
You know exactly what I'm thinking here. You want to hop into this 2 tight end, multiple tight end mindset. You have Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 1. You have Jordan Addison as wide receiver 2. Your wide receiver 3 right now is Ty Felton.
Yep.
So, and the wide receivers here, they're fine. They're fine. But you know what might be better? Adding another tight end, basing out of 12 personnel. Get me Kenyon Sadiq. Pair him with TJ Hawkinson. Kevin O'Connell's adopting the new wave for Kyler Murray. Let's see it happen, man. Let's see it. I'd be a big fan.
You are such an a-hole because I was about to take him. I thought about taking him a couple picks ago, but you're absolutely right. A guy who is the closest branch, you would say, to the Sean McVay tree. It's Kevin O'Connell. Was his offensive coordinator, won a Super Bowl with him as the offensive coordinator. If he sees Sean McVay run a lot of this 12 personnel, 13 personnel, et cetera, I think there's going to be some copycatting going on. I think Kevin O'Connell's going to be like, all right, well, you have Terrence Ferguson and Tyler Higbee. I run you TJ Hawkinson and Kenyon Sadiq. Maybe it's just Oregon tight ends that are now running the league. Who knows? Maybe that's the new wave, and we're misinterpreting it. But
let me say, Kenyon Sadiq in general as a prospect, man, he's a crush of mine. He's a crush of mine because he's such a good blocker, but then he's also a remarkable athlete. The performance he had at the combine was really, like that blew me away.
Yeah.
I did not think he was going to go ahead and do that because he was a blocking tight end.
For a guy who is so loved by so many draft analysts, people like me and you who do this show, coaches, didn't have a lot of production. Like, you're going to be underwhelmed if you go and Google his stats. I think part of that speaks to the Oregon offense being at times dysfunctional. I want to say dysfunctional, but not in rhythm, I would say.
Well, they used him as a blocker. He was a blocking tight end. But then when he got the ball, he was always explosive, and he's a good route runner. He could do all of that stuff, man. Sadiq, I think he is a really interesting piece out of this class. He's one of my favorite players, really. But now the Carolina Panthers find themselves in an interesting spot. What do you look at here?
So I'm going to start by throwing a stray at PFF because they list the Panthers' biggest need at wide receiver, which I don't agree with.
They're pretty deep there.
Yeah, they're pretty deep. I like Coker. Leggett is not anything great, but he's your third wide receiver. Who cares? And then obviously Ted McMillan last year was really, really good. So I don't think that they necessarily have a hole at wide receiver. I think maybe some more depth would be nice, but probably a bit rich for my blood to take one at pick 19, especially given that the ones have gone. I understand, that they signed. Well, here's my thing, right? I'm looking at two guys. I'm looking at Vega Ione, but they've paid huge contracts to Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis on the interior. So you're thinking, okay, probably don't want him to play guard. Do you want him to play center? Maybe, but whatever. Then I'm thinking Francis Maioga, I hope I'm saying that right, from Miami. And because Ike Ekwonu got hurt and he's going to probably miss the entire year, which, by the way, what a horrible injury to have in the playoffs. Yeah. They might have beat the Rams if he was healthy for that whole game, but whatever. But then they somehow get Rasheed Walker for 1 year's, $10 million? I love the Panthers free agent class before they did that. And then they somehow get this guy for 1 year, $10 million. So that's clearly a very mercenary-esque deal while Ike Ekwonu recovers. So I don't know if they're going to go with offensive linemen here. I do think that they could go linebacker, but then again, they signed Devin Floyd. So a lot of the needs that I think this team has, I think they've already addressed. So I'm going to go with an edge rusher here. I'm going to go with a guy who is the best edge rusher on the board in terms of overall consensus and what the coaches would pick. And that's Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. A guy who I think you could describe him as a brute. I think that would be a good way to put it. The Panthers defense also, I thought their defensive backfield was really solid, especially towards the end of the year. When Mike Jackson really started to kick it into gear, their defensive backfield was real nice. Their edge rushers and their defensive line was not consistent all year. Edge rusher to me is the move here at pick 19. Again, this is now where we get into tricky waters because we're beyond that A tier of pass rushers. Mm-hmm. So now you're talking about guys who have all sorts of different grades. Falk might have a second-round grade, a third-round grade. Some guys might have a top 10. Who knows? I think that Falk is probably going to be the pick here for the Panthers, given what they've done in the offseason to shore up some needs, and then they can go with an edge rusher in the draft.
Falk's just generally the type of guy the Panthers tend to like, more of these run, defend first types of edge rushers.
Brute, exactly.
And that's exactly what Falk is. But Falk does definitely have some upside as a pass rusher. I don't want
Yeah.
people to underestimate
I
that.
sneaky like him kind of. I'm debating putting him in that like tier 1. I'm like flirting with putting him like on that tier
I,
list cuz I do
he
really
needs
like
to
him.
develop. Like his play recognition is some of the worst ever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But
true.
he can defend the run, man. There's no
Yes.
doubting that. Now the Cowboys, they also need a pass rusher. I really think there's only one choice, and it sucks because I don't think it's exactly what they're looking for as a pass rusher. But I think they need it. I think they need their pass rush help here. I think it's all if they leave round one with these 2 picks and they don't draft a single pass rusher, they should feel terrible.
Yeah.
They should. I think they have to go DJ Parker. I think he's far and
Ooh.
away the only like draftable option. Or right here, really. I
DJ
think he
Parker,
is.
edge out of Clemson. Wow, look at that.
I think he's the best edge rusher there. And again, it's not a pick I like at all, but they need it. They need it a lot.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's where I think they go. Like maybe they go Caleb Banks on the interior, but I think they need the edge presence complementary to Rashawn Gary, and they need it badly because
yeah.
Rashawn
Especially
Gary, he's not exactly a name you love either.
no, his film last year in Green Bay was, I don't want to say horrible, but
It
especially
wasn't appealing.
when Micah Parsons was in uniform and playing for the Packers, he looked a lot better than when he was the lone pass rusher on that team. When Micah
Yeah.
Parsons went down, Rashawn Gary's production didn't exactly skyrocket. So I would be potentially worried, like you said, about Rashawn Gary being my one and only quality pass rusher. But I guess we will have to see where the Cowboys do with pick 20.